Well, greetings, friends, and thank you for tuning in for our Wednesday or any other day Bible study. And we started last week, and we're continuing this week. I'm interviewing two people each week, one inside our church, one outside our church. And I'm asking, what in the Bible has been mattering to you lately and why? And it's really interesting. This week, I have two fascinating people outside the church. I'm talking to Reverend Stephanie Hand. Now, Stephanie, she's no stranger to our church. Stephanie's interesting. She's running for city council. She's a pastor, heads up evangelism for our conference, and so on. One of the greatest, most moving preachers that I know. Her signature, her automatic signature says "igniting." Like you just think she might ignite at any moment. She's just so on fire and passionate. She's amazing. I'm going to talk to Stephanie, and then also to our own Dr. Uiyeon Kim, whom we know always has something wise and thoughtful to say. So I hope you'll enjoy these two conversations about, what in the Bible's been mattering. Begin to think about what in the Bible's been mattering to you and start to reach out and let me know too. All right, Stephanie Hand, greetings.
Hi there. Hi there. How are you today?
If I were doing any better, I couldn't stand myself, and nobody could stand me either. Thank you for joining us for our Wednesday Bible study. Although I call it Wednesday, people watch it all kinds of times. And your job, you're the district director of Vitality or something like that.
Vitality strategist for the Metro District. Yes.
I think Stephanie, by the word vitality in the dictionary, they got a picture of you.
Thank you.
You're just always joyful and exuberant, and you're great. Thank you. For folks who don't know you, Stephanie's ordained. I knew her before she was ordained back in the day. And Stephanie married into kind of the ultimate blue blood Methodist family in the world. The Hands, your family's amazing, and you're no less amazing yourself. And I did want to mention this. This isn't our topic today. You're offering yourself. You're running for public office.
I am actually running for Charlotte City Council District 6. Yes.
That's not why I've got you on here, but I do want to thank you for that. I've thought about doing that myself quite a number of times, and it's important for people to hear God's call and to have godly people serving. So thank you so much for that. That's hard to do. Anyway, but our purpose today, though, is talk about Bible. Always a great topic. Can't go wrong.
Always.
And what I wanted to ask is just something in Scripture that to you lately has mattered.
I think in my meditation time, and it's interesting that you've asked me to talk about this, is Psalms 46:10, be still and know that I am God. And the twin for me of those two texts is Proverbs 3:5 and 6.
Oh,
and that one, I actually tried to preach on it early on in preaching. And I decided to do something different with it the morning of. You didn't teach me that part, James. The morning of, 2 hours prior to, because I was trying to impress the people who were coming to see me that day. And it's trust in God in everything that we do. Lean not onto your own understanding, but always look to Christ. I didn't do it. So those two things for me right now in this season are the two tension texts that I am meditating on and resonating with.
I joked, I came up with this idea years ago that there was an obscure Hebrew manuscript that I discovered. It's just being silly. That Psalm 46:10 actually says, "Be still and know that I am God, and you aren't." I resonate with you. My Palm Sunday sermon this year was, instead of about all the racket and Palm Sunday stuff going on, is that Jesus, he was quiet. He was that donkey it was untrained, but it didn't buck, it didn't bolt, it just kept moving with Jesus. Why is that a big thing? Just to be still.
So one of the things I remember, one of my mentors, Dr. Lily Jones, used to say to me is, you should go on a silent retreat. And I said, for what? I am a busy, love the energy. I'm an extrovert, love people. But in loving people and being an extrovert, you can get exhausted and think it's about you. And when you're still with God, you realize, or I've realized, that I ain't got nothing compared to what God has. And I need to be still in God's presence so that God can heal me from the woundedness of being too much of this and too much of that, and by people, but also so that God can direct my path. And God comes in the stillness, and for my life, God comes in the stillness, probably of the early mornings, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning. So I understand it clearly.
Uh, I'm married a morning person, but I'm not one. I'm a little foggy headed in the morning, but and the for me, the stillness, the quiet, it's not that I need it to rest. The way I like to think of it is I need God, and maybe even God needs that with me.
Mhm, mhm.
Again, my Palm Sunday sermon wasn't that great, but in it I talked about that I've grown children. If I could have anything back with them, it wouldn't be some activity that we did. It would be, when my child was an infant, and we just were just in the quiet and the dark together, or just sitting on the couch together. A lot of times when somebody's dying, you're with them and there's not much to say. Maybe they can't say anything. You're just, I said, that's where the love is in the
Mhm,
stillness and in the quiet. And that's with God too.
mhm. I would absolutely agree, and listen, I don't like being a morning person, but, frequently I'm awakened and then can't go back and intentionally, but I like to come downstairs in my house, and although we're empty nesters now, just finding a space, and then during the heat of COVID, I go in my backyard and I would notice things, just sitting there noticing God's creation, like more red birds than I've ever seen. And the interaction of the animals early in the morning, just sitting still. I never, ever, ever paid attention to those types of things. And I saw a side of God that I've never sat still long enough to even pay attention of. And so it helped me to understand and actually reevaluate the value of life, the value of time, and what's most important. And that was being still, and sitting with God. And actually, I wasn't being still to sit with God. I just wanted something else to do. But in my sitting still, I probably have heard the voice of God, the feeling and the movement of the Spirit, just by disconnecting from my phone and being still.
And that whole thing of, we people think prayer is when you issue your requests to God, talking to God. But I love, Samuel, hears the voice, and it's, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So the listening is not just listening for God to speak, but what you were saying about going outside. I talked to a young woman the other day. She's 32 years old. She's absolutely brilliant, very successful. I took her and some other teenagers on a retreat years ago, and we were going out for a long walk one day, and they all had their earbuds in, and I said, "Stop!" So they pulled them out, and after we walked a couple of miles, I said, "What was it like not having that stuff in your ear?" And they were like, "We heard the wind. I heard a bird." And we just miss so much of the
Mhm.
simple wonder that God has laid out there, not just so, oh, nature's amazing, but so that we'll know God, so that we'll draw closer to God. It's a matter of listening and being still. Yeah.
And we're at the end of the day, if we rehearse Genesis in our head, we are caretakers of the earth, and that means all of the earth. And if we can't understand what is in the earth, how can we, of course, advocate in ensuring that environments are taken care of and water is taken care of and we're not polluting it all, just because we can use it all, but to actually see the wonder and the beauty of what is the text that says your panteth like a deer in a stream of water. Yes,
Psalm 42. Oh yeah.
yes. You read it until you see it, and then it becomes an awe of God, of all of God's creation.
So I don't know when I first thought about this. We tend to read the Bible indoors,
Mm.
right? Bible study group meets indoors. In our church, you read the Bible indoors, but to read it out of doors, read it under a bridge, read it by the beach, read it Out Jesus and the disciples, they were outside most of the time. That psalmist that said, like a deer, I pant for flowing. It was outside. It was like
Outside.
there wasn't water, looking for water. Yeah, I love that.
I'm an East Coast girl. I'm from Morehead City, North Carolina, and so the beach is my panther of my soul. And when I moved here, there have been years that I have not been to the water, and now there is a yearning to go. And every time I try to go, the prices are astronomical and it's full. But to your point, is just reading scripture out loud outside. It does something else. Or just reading scripture out loud in your house, and not just reading it intellectually, but read it robustly and what those words mean. There's something that takes it to the next level of understanding this printed words. Because I think I can speak for Stephanie Hand. I just go through the motions sometimes, but lately those words have been leaping from the pages. And I get to see every now and again the revelation of what God said in the scripture.
Be still and know that I'm God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lead not unto
Your own understanding. All your ways submit yourself to Him.
Work on that every hour, every day for the rest of your life. It'd be great.
It would be. But I trust in me, friend. Listen. I trust in Stephanie Hand. And that's why I blew that text. I messed up so bad. And I have not preached it since. But there will be an opportunity too, because that speaks volume, I think, to all of us who are faith believers, particularly in America, because we have so much freedoms, and some freedoms, but we have freedoms that other countries don't. And so we rely on ourselves so much and not on God. And so that's some inner work for me.
Stephanie, thank you so much for this time with me. It means a lot to me, but also for sharing with our people. I know they'll be blessed by you.
Listen, thank you for the opportunity, and blessings, my friends at Myers Park United Methodist Church.
So, Dr. Uiyeon Kim, thank you for joining us. It's cool that you're Dr. Kim, but I'm just going to call you Uiyeon. You know that.
Sounds great, James.
Yeah. Anyhow, you doing well today?
Absolutely. Beautiful day. Yeah.
So we are in this series. I'm talking to a lot of interesting people, some in our church, some outside our church, about things in the Bible that have been mattering to you lately or in general in life. So tell us, what's been on your mind?
So one of the passages that really puzzles me still from the gospel lesson is from Matthew chapter 15. It's also in Mark chapter 7. So it's in 2 of the 4 gospel lessons. And it's about a story of the Canaanite woman whose daughter's ill. So she comes before Jesus. And in the Matthew's version, which is the one that I kind of wanted to focus on, she's in certain ways turned away 3 different times, right? So she comes pleading for her daughter's health and healing. Jesus doesn't answer the first time. In fact, the disciple says, send her away. She's shouting at us. Well, it's kind of easy to see why she would shout. Her daughter's sick. She's desperate. And the second time she cries out to Jesus, he says, I've come for the lost children of Israel. And then the third time, Jesus is essentially kind of seems to me like rebukes her. Listen, is it right to give my children's food to the dogs? It just seems a little harsh, right? And then this woman, Canaanite woman, I love her response. She acknowledges that when she says even the dogs eat the crumbs off of the master's table. Upon further reading, it seems to me that she acknowledges her status, and then she refers to Jesus as a master again, even after that kind of harsh review. Now, so in ways of agency, I think this woman exercises her agency more than just about anybody I've seen in the gospel narratives. But I do wonder, why such a harsh response, in part by Jesus? It's nothing new for Jesus to invite others' response, or even challenge them. But what he says to the woman just seems way out of bounds. So why that type of interchange? Why that type of harsh criticism to a desperate mother?
And not out of bounds, like in our view of what is polite, but out of bounds given what Jesus normally seems to be about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For that reason, this story really stands out. And I don't know the type of conversations you've had, James. I've had fellow clergy friends who may just kind of pawn this off. Oh, this is just Jesus once again testing one's faith and their sincerity. But others have shared, well, maybe this is when Jesus's humanity is coming into more in play, where he too succumbs to the sense of Gentile Jewish divide and speaks wrongly. Who knows? I tend to think not, because I like to hold on to, if anything, I lean probably too much onto Jesus's divinity. But still, it is puzzling to me, being a father now myself, that the heart of a loving mom in desperation is met with such harsh. There's nothing new for the disciples say stuff like, she's shouting at us, send her away, or send them away, or send the children away. But for Jesus to respond in such a way is, I still can't make sense of it. I can't make sense of it.
I love the way it's sort of easy to get Jesus, the good shepherd, he seems sweet and gentle. He's holding a lamb. He's gathering children. we kind of love that. And there's so much in the Gospels that throws us off balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Jesus, we can't reduce him just to like, oh, this kind of sweet grandfatherly type. And then I think about things like, the Da Vinci Code stuff came out. And the idea was sort of like, Constantine and his henchmen got everything organized to pull this over on people. If you're trying to pull something over on people, you make Jesus look under control, always the same. So you don't get, this is the kind of story that, why did it get passed along? Like, it's a little bit, not embarrassing, but it raises more questions than it helps. But yet, at least two of the gospel writers, they were willing to put that in there.
So that's a whole different kind of a point that has been very helpful for me. If the ancient Christians wanted to pull something over the mind of the populace, that they would not have written and certainly have passed down the gospel narratives as they did. Like, they would have sanitized it way more to make it in a specific, consistent form that's far more appealing and attractive. But we have stories like this where not only makes it kind of scratch your head, but it also, I think for me, it provides comfort of not only humanity of Christ, but also humanity of the disciples as well. There's a lot of scratch your head moments, just like our own lives. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and of course, there are people who they like kind of insider outsider stuff. And so, like, don't just give it to anybody. Like, this is for the insiders. Some people like that. That's not what Jesus is about. I love that. How did Jesus, no matter how much he clinged to his divinity, how did Jesus learn what God was asking of him? We tend to think, he popped out of the womb and he knew what God was asking of him. But it's got to be something that he discerned over time. Clearly, his main mission, being Jewish, is to go to Jews. He teaches in the synagogue. He goes to the temple. Is to try to get the Jews to be who God has always been inviting them to be. Clearly, that's his mission. Is this the moment where he learns through this very awkward encounter, oh gosh, God's calling me to something even beyond that? It's in the Garden of Gethsemane, I think, that Jesus, he finally exceeds. So God is asking me to die. I mean, because at that point, he's still saying, do I have to do this? Could I please not do this? And at that moment, he realizes, this is what the ask is. And that's not problematical to think of Jesus as, over time, discerning the fullness of his call.
So that would blow most of our minds away, that Jesus, not only in his formative years as a child, as a teenager, but into his adulthood, he's still learning, discerning God's call. And it would be consistent that he, through even Christ himself, through the Canaanite woman, learns the fullness of God's calling on his ministry. I like the sound. I really like that. It certainly serves a valuable lesson and brings about truth to all of our lives and as our call to discipleship. But boy, it's a little harsh, James, a little harsh.
I read a sermon years ago. I should have looked it up before we talked about this, by a woman. It was entitled Crumbs. And she kind of explores this whole thing of how you have a table, the dog's down there, crumbs fall down, the dog laps them up. And if we're offended by this, we have to realize that a lot of times the way we think of certain people, even who are recipients of our charity, it's a little bit like crumbs down to the dog. We're the haves, they're the have-nots. We're the deserving ones, they're the undeserving. We'll give them a few crumbs versus inviting them to be a guest at the table. It was a powerful sermon. I'll have to go back and look at that again. But you know, what an image, right? Crumbs.
Right. But in this case, she's even grateful for the crumbs. She's saying, I'll take the crumbs from the Lord's table. You know, this woman, it's just coincidentally, there's several stories of women who are shown as the most persistent ones. There's the whole story of the unjust judge. This woman wears him out, as we read in the story. And in similar fashion here, it seems like this Canaanite woman, a loving mother with a sick daughter, wears Jesus out to a point where he finally says, your faith has made your daughter well. And there's always a lesson in that, right? For our need to be persistent when it comes to our discipleship.
I love those moments in the Bible. I was thinking about Acts chapter 16, where there's the slave girl and Paul and Silas are walking through Philippi, and she just gets on their nerves so much they finally heal her. Just to it's perfect, right?
Yeah.
And the Bible's so human, is so earthy, is so real.
I mean, seems to be some consistent. I have not done the research in terms of how many times it appears, but it seems to me that with men, there is persistence of pride that has to be overcome. And with women, they're just persistent, period, in ways of their seeking of healing, justice, goodness. That certainly speaks true to me, because I've had the fortunate story of my mom being very much kind of the example of the women that we see in the gospel lessons, where she is a persistent woman that never gave up when it came to things that are good and loving, especially for her family. So stories like this resonate strongly with me.
What a blessing for you. Uiyeon, thank you so much for sharing on this text and for your life and for your ministry. We're grateful.